I wrote to Michael McLearmore in Ireland. I didn't know how famous he was. And on the first night he said to me, Michael, I want you to come into my dressing room every night on the half. And I'm going to lie down on the couch and take my clothes off. And I'd like you to put this special ointment over my body to relax me before the performance. Rub it in gently, both back and front, and then help me get dressed in my tights and doublet. No, I said, no, I'm not going to do that, Mr. McLearmore. So he would go and fuck yourself then. And that was it. I got thrown out of the room and he never spoke to me again.
I was in Ring Round the Moon. I was playing a young dancer. And then, to my total astonishment, I got a message from my agent saying, Charles Chaplin wants you to send him some photographs. It seemed so insane. I didn't send them. I thought it was a joke. So then I got a telegram. Where are the photographs, Charles Chaplin? Oh, God. So I sent them, of course, immediately.
Pardon me, but have you a fly swatter?
I beg your pardon?
Now, if you come begging around here, I shall have to call the police.
I repeat, I beg your pardon.
I don't care what you repeat or what you've eaten.
I have eaten nothing.
You haven't? Poor dear. Here, stop and get yourself a sandwich.
I loved the way Chaplin worked as a director. I probably would not now. He was totally specific about every single thing. Put your hand here, look down, look up, say the line. I can see it a little bit in the film, and there are times when I wished perhaps I'd been a little freer and I could have done something that wasn't sometimes so mannered. But it was mannered in a way he wanted, and I satisfied him, and that was all that worried me. Limelight was certainly my first taste of real stardom. I became a name, and I was on the cover of magazines, etc., etc.
When I first acted in front of a camera, I was told, act to one person who's there, or to your family who are there behind the camera. Don't think ever of the millions, thousands that you're being beamed to. You act personally, and I've always tried to do that.
The goodness of the night upon you, friends. What is the news?
The Duke does greet you, General, and he requires your post-haste appearance, even on the instant.
What is the matter, think?
Something from Cyprus. As I may divine, it is a business of some heat. The galleys have sent a dozen sequined messengers this very night at one another's heels.
I think it's more difficult in live theatre because you've got to fill a space, and you've got to be as real and as true and as effective right at the top there and right there. For me, there is always a kind of third eye, and at the back of my head I am sitting somewhere in the middle of the stalls. So although I can be totally inside what I'm doing, a part of me is out there with them reacting to what I'm doing.
I went to see Sir Lawrence when he wasn't well in his house in London. He said, what are you doing now, Mike? And I said, I'm doing a film called The Cook, the Thief, His Wife and Her Lover. He said, what sort of film is that? Sort of a title like that. What do you do in it? I said, well, in the first scene, Sir Lawrence, I strip a man naked in the car park of a restaurant. He's totally naked. I then covered him in dog shit, which is really chocolate cake. I smear it all over his naked body, throw him over the bonnet of my car, and then I piss the dog shit off him with an electrified penis. While the camera is shooting between my legs, and you see the coloured pea washing all the stuff off it. So that's the opening bit for me, Sir Lawrence. He said, my God, what happens then? I said, well, then I get hold of one of the waitresses and jam a fork through her face. Then I get Alan Howard, who I believe is having an affair with my wife, Helen Mirren, and I force a book down his throat with a wooden spoon. He's God, he said. Who wrote this film? I said, Peter Greenaway. He said, give me his bloody telephone number. You're not playing that part, I am.
I was called to audition for a play called The Ladies Not for Burning, which was going to be directed in and starring John Gielgud. And I was to audition with another young hopeful who was playing the young lead opposite me, who was sitting there with, I remember now, a green tweed suit, not a very good one. green eyes to match, very good ones indeed, a beautiful voice, and we both got the parts, and that was Richard Burton, aged 23. Burton and I became lovers and remained so for about 6 years.
If you can't bear the thought of messing up your nice, tidy soul, you'd better give up the whole idea of life and become a saint.
There was a link between the role that I played and Burton played in Look Back in Anger, which was a kind of animosity that grew up between two people. And then, of course, they fall in love and become lovers, and there was a great deal of richness, may I say, to draw on for our relationships in that, which was also continuing off screen. It was easy to work with Richard for me, as it was in the later film, the Spy Who Came In From the Cold, because it was the partnerships, like dancers. We knew each other so well, we knew the moves. When we did The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, Richard had changed enormously. He was then, I think, 40. He had been married for a year to Elizabeth Taylor. He was very nervous of her thinking that he was in any way interested in me, which in fact he wasn't. She would sit on the set and watch like a kind of vulture, and then this terrible voice, "Richard!" And he would come running to her. So the situation was a little bit difficult.
Let me take you back to I, Claudius for BBC Television, 1976. Did it feel, when you were making it, that it was going to be a big success?
The critics weren't bowled over by it at all. They gradually came over to our side and said it was lovely. But I think while we were doing it, it was BBC Two, classic serial, posh, Roman history.
Then back to Wintertide again, where nothing stirs.
Is there a big audience out there for this? But there was. And the one who, I remember he came to a recording early on, was Peter O'Toole. And he said to me afterwards, "I don't think the critics will go for this very much, but millions will watch."
In 1986, along came a huge television role, and that was Dennis Potter's The Singing Detective. How did you get involved in that?
The scripts for The Singing Detective arrived, and I didn't know Dennis very well, but he was at the first read-through, and that's when I used to watch his movements and watch his face, what his positions were like. And he said to me, "Do you never speak to me, do you?" I said, "No, I'm a bit wary of you." He says, "What?" He says, "Why?" I said, "Well, you're very clever, and I'm just a mechanic, I'm sitting here, I don't know how to speak to you." He said, "Well, we're going to have some topic of conversation." I said, "Well, I don't know what." He said, "What do you like in life?" I said, "Well, I don't know, I quite like cars." And I could see his face drop. And then, but then whenever I met him after that, he'd say, "Morning, Michael." I'd say, "Hello." He said, "Have you seen the new Ford Anglia?" You know, so he must have thought I was a cretin.
I'm gonna buy a paper doll that I can call my own, a doll that other fellows cannot steal.
I was living in Connecticut, and I was called by my then agent and asked if I would like to play Lady Marchmain in Brideshead Revisited. I was 48 going on 49. I was so vain that I nearly turned it down.
Is it true, as Mr. Samgrass tells me, that you are my son's only friend this time?
Well, some people have gone down. I suppose perhaps I am. We do spend a lot of time together.
I'm glad of it. Sure, I have reason to be grateful to you, Charles, too. Friendships like yours can be such a help.
We filmed Brideshead in one, I think it's based on 2 houses, but one of them is certainly Castle Howard. And that's where I stayed. During my marriage to Roth, Philip loved the idea of my playing this great lady, and he said, just don't go into the dining room and feel the curtains and say, "This is very nice stuff, how much is this?"
Gosford Park.
Yes.
Oh, that was the best experience I've ever had in a film. Happiness. Like going on holiday every day and getting paid for it. All mates in it. We all knew each other anyway. Maggie Smith, Eileen Atkins downstairs.
All right, get on with your work.
Separate group, upstairs, downstairs. And it was just fun and terrific. When I started that film, I didn't really studied the script in great depth. I was leaving it a bit to chance, and I remember in the scene I'm sitting at the dining table and eating with the dog on my lap, and I was sort of looking at Maggie quite a lot, and she said, "Why are you looking at me?" I said, "Well, you're my wife." And she said, "I'm not your wife, you idiot." She said, "Your wife is down there." "What? Who was my wife?"
I love making films. I love doing films. I've never, except on one occasion, played the lead in a film. And that was glorious. I loved it. A film called Love is the Devil about Francis Bacon. I often think, whereas I'm a knight of the theatre, but I'm a serf in the movies, I'm still kind of way down the ladder in the movies. But I work in movies, and that's fine, and television, you know.
And most of the films you've done, in fact, are films for television, if you like.
Yes, a lot of them, yes. Apart from films like Gladiator and the blockbusters, a couple of those I've been in. If you're playing somebody that is known, and people have an idea of who they are, what they look like, how they sound, it is in a sense constraining. Whereas to play Hamlet, the world is your oyster. Bacon himself had done a lot of television interviews, and I was able to watch those, copy body language, not particularly sound. They didn't want me particularly to sound like him, but certainly the personality. And curiously, they made me look like him. And I don't look like him, but they made me look like him within 10 minutes.
And see what comes up this time.
Physically, he was a masochist. But emotionally, he was a terrible sadist. And that's the glory of being an actor. I could pretend to be a masochist and a sadist. I could pretend to enjoy having cigarettes stubbed out on me.
You couldn't relate to sadomasochism in Francis Bacon.
Sorry. When it's being perpetrated by Daniel Craig, perhaps as it was, perhaps I could.
Judah, I don't know what's wrong with you these days. You're a different person.
Woody Allen simply asked my agent if I would come and meet him. He was very charming. He sent me the sides. That is not the script, but just your own dialogue. Well, it was very, very little, indeed. And I thought, well, I suppose I'd better do it because it's Woody Allen and I'd like to, but I'm not going to get much out of this. But it turned out to be rather a good role.
No, darling, you're not going to go and get them tonight. You can go and get them in the morning.
I've got an hour's work to do.
Yeah, but we're in the middle of a dinner party.
so
So I
sorry.
do apologize.
Please.
People ask me if there's any resemblance, so to speak, between the way Chaplin directed and the way Woody Allen did, because they're both great comedians, etc. But really, they couldn't be more different, because where Chaplin wanted absolute perfection and obedience, Woody Allen wanted you to be free, but that was very difficult for me because he wanted you to improvise, which I'm not good at, and also it was to improvise in American. I didn't realize how difficult that was for a foreigner, and I found myself saying things like "actually" or something totally ridiculous.
I took over Dumbledore from Richard Harris, and I was in it for 7 years.
Earlier today, Professor Moody placed the Triwizard Cup deep within the maze. Only he knows its exact position.
You've implied that you're a bit shy of the warmth of adult applause, but this doesn't apply to kids.
No, kids are different, aren't they? I mean, they see Dumbledore in the street, and it almost brings tears to your eyes. If they're young children, they get quite excited by it. They can't believe it.
I've been a working actress for over 60 years, which comes as a great surprise to me, and I can say that it has sustained me totally. In my 50s, I did some pretty good things, including Brideshead Revisited. I played, not that long ago, someone whom I realized was Moses' grandmother, which gave me rather a shock. I've just played the Queen's grandmother in apparently a very good film called The King's Speech. And now this is a late flowering of the bloom. We shall see.